Welcome to the deep dive. For the longest time, it was really up for debate, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Even among scientists.
Yeah, whether our brains could actually keep growing new cells,
Yeah.
especially in those memory areas, after childhood.
The common idea was always that things sort of, well, slow right down or stop altogether in adulthood.
Exactly. But what if that whole picture was, well, just not quite right?
It's such a fundamental question. I mean, if our brains can keep making new neurons, especially there.
In the memory centers.
Right. It
Well,
changes everything about how we think about learning throughout life, adapting,
true.
maybe even recovering from brain issues. The implications are huge.
You absolutely nailed it. And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at this really groundbreaking new study. It gives some incredibly clear evidence about this process.
This idea of continuous neuron formation.
Yes, the constant making of new neurons right in the adult brain's memory hub. Our main source here is a great piece from Science Alert. Just came out July 7th, 2025.
And it summarizes that research published in Science, the journal.
That's the one. So our mission for you today is to really unpack this. Look at the evidence they found.
Get into the science, the methods they used, which are pretty clever.
Definitely. And then explore what this all means, the implications for how our brains work, how we learn, maybe even future treatments.
So let's start with that debate you mentioned. It's been going on for a while.
It really has. Lots of studies, sometimes pointing in different directions about neurogenesis, that's a technical term, right? Making new brain cells.
Correct. Specifically, whether it happens in the hippocampus after we're kids. Settling this is, well, it's massive for neuroscience.
Okay, but why the hippocampus specifically? What makes that part so important in this whole discussion?
The hippocampus. It's really central. It's not just any part of the brain. It's seen as the crucial memory-forming region.
Where we make new memories stick.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah, consolidating information. But it's also tied into our emotions, and it's vital for learning new things, new skills. And the study we're talking about is zoomed in even further on a section called the dentate gyrus. That area is known to be a real hotspot for brain plasticity, for change.
Right. So this new study, it really offers some of the clearest proof yet that this key area, the hippocampus, keeps making fresh neurons, like way into adulthood.
It seems so. And it's solid work coming from researchers over in Sweden, the Karolinska Institute and Chalmers University of Technology.
And they had this great quote from one of the researchers.
Friesen, Jonas Friesen, yeah, molecular biologist. He said, "This gives us an important piece of the puzzle in understanding how the human brain works and changes during life."
It feels like a big piece of that puzzle.
It really does.
Yeah.
Just confirming that humans can form new neurons there throughout life, like we knew other animals could.
Mice, monkeys, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It fundamentally shifts the ground for so many other questions in science. How do adults pick up new skills? What's really going on when the brain ages, or sadly, deteriorates? This changes the baseline understanding.
That's a massive shift, yeah. But if this has been so debated, how did they manage to get such clear evidence now? What was different about their approach?
They used a really sophisticated technique. It's called RNA analysis.
Okay, RNA analysis. How does that work differently?
Well, instead of just looking at the cells, analyzing the RNA lets you see which genes are active inside the cell. They did this with brain cells from people up to age 78.
Wow, okay.
So it tells you not just what the cell is, but what it's doing, its function, its developmental stage. It's a much deeper look than older methods allowed.
And what did that deeper look show them?
That was the key finding. They identified that some of these neurons were specifically set up to function as neural progenitor cells, MPCs for short.
Progenitor cells, like the parent cells.
Exactly, the seed cells, the ones that actually generate the brand new nerve cells.
Yeah.
Finding those active NPCs was crucial.
That sounds like a really smart way to track down the source of new neurons. Do they only find these in humans? You mentioned other animals earlier.
Good point. No, they also found these NPCs shared really striking similarities with the ones found in mice, pigs, monkeys.
So it suggests this is a pretty old fundamental process in biology.
And it's into that way, yeah. A conserved process. And they didn't stop there. They used machine learning, artificial intelligence.
Oh, interesting. How did that help?
It helped them sort the cells very precisely. They could group them based on how far along they were in development,
Cool.
all the way from being like a blank slate stem cell
Right.
to becoming an immature neuron that was actually in the process of dividing, getting ready to become two new cells.
Wow. So systematically tracking them through those stages Must have been key to clearing up the confusion from earlier studies.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
You see, some earlier work, even by some of the same researchers, had found new neurons, yes, but they couldn't definitively say how they got there.
They couldn't pinpoint the origin.
Exactly. Or confirm it was an ongoing active process with these specific parent cells. This study provides that missing link. It identifies the actual progenitor cells doing the work.
So Frison's other quote makes sense now.
Right. When he said, "We have now been able to identify these cells of origin," which confirms that there is an ongoing formation of neurons in the hippocampus of the adult brain. It really feels like it closes the door on that specific debate.
That seems undeniable then. Okay, so the main point is neurogenesis, making new neurons, it definitely keeps happening in our hippocampus throughout adult life. But is it always the same? Does it slow down? Is it the same for you and me?
That's where it gets even more nuanced and interesting. So yes, confirmed it happens throughout adulthood, but the study did suggest that, generally speaking.
Generally speaking.
The rate does tend to slow down as we get older, which perhaps isn't totally surprising.
Makes sense.
But, and this is also really important, their analysis showed different rates in different people.
So it's not a uniform process across the board.
Doesn't seem to be, no. Some people appear to have more neurogenesis happening than others, even potentially at similar ages, which opens up a whole new set of questions.
That really is fascinating. Okay, so taking these findings, ongoing neurogenesis, slowing with age, but varying between people, what does this mean for the bigger picture? What kind of research does this open up?
Well, connecting it outwards, this confirmation is it's foundational for loads of other scientific questions.
Like how we learn.
Exactly. How do adults learn new complex skills? Maybe this ongoing neuron production is part of the actual mechanism behind that adaptability. It also really informs how we understand brain aging.
And maybe what goes wrong in deterioration.
Potentially, yes. What's actually happening at a cellular level as the brain changes in later life?
And what about that variation you mentioned, the different rates in different people? Could that explain why some people learn faster or maybe even linked to personality?
That's a very compelling hypothesis the study raises. Could these different rates of making new neurons relate to differences in, say, brain plasticity?
Which could affect learning, maybe personality traits, even risk for certain diseases?
Potentially, yes. But, and this is really crucial to emphasize, that's a hypothesis.
Something for future studies?
Absolutely. They didn't directly test those links between neurogenesis rates and personality or learning speed in this study, but it's a very exciting direction for future research to explore.
Makes sense. And I guess it must also raise questions about brain conditions like neurological or psychiatric diseases.
Precisely. Another idea that flows from this is that maybe some brain conditions are influenced by how well or how quickly the brain can produce these fresh neurons.
Did the study look at that at all?
They noted that some of the brain samples came from people who did have a history of psychiatric or neurological diseases.
Okay.
But again, the researchers were careful to point out they didn't directly investigate the link between the disease and the rate of neurogenesis in those individuals. That needs specific follow-up studies.
I see. But the potential is there.
The potential is definitely there, especially when you think about possible future treatments. Frison actually commented on this too.
What did he say?
He said, "Our research may also have implications for the development of regenerative treatments that stimulate neurogenesis in neurodegenerative and psychiatric disorders."
Wow, stimulating our own brain's neuron production. That would be incredible.
It's a long way off perhaps, but this confirmation opens that door a bit wider.
So let's bring this back home. For you listening, why does knowing that your brain keeps making new memory cells, why does that actually matter?
Well, look, this isn't just some small scientific detail. It kind of rewrites the operating manual for the adult brain, doesn't it?
In a way.
It shows that our ability to generate these fundamental building blocks for memory and learning isn't just locked in when we're young. It's a lifelong process. It's adaptable.
Meaning our brains are more dynamic than we thought.
Much more dynamic, more capable of change, potentially throughout our lives. Even deep into later life, it reshapes how we should think about our own potential as adults.
It really does. So here's something to think about. If our memory centers are constantly being reshaped, constantly generating new connections, what does that really mean for our potential?
Our potential to learn new things.
To adapt. Yeah, or even to kind of redefine ourselves at any age. Just ponder that for a bit. How might really understanding that our brains have this lifelong ability to create new neurons How might that change how we approach education or aging?
Or even how we think about our own identity.
Exactly, how we think about who we are. Lots to consider there. Welcome to the deep dive. For the longest time, it was really